welcome all of you to the City of Gold, Johannesburg. It's a place that holds all the contradictions and challenges of our time, where extreme wealth and poverty coexist to create all the conditions of conflict, crime, and the continued marginalization of whole communities. I'm an immigrant. I love this city. I came here 40 years ago, almost 40 years ago. I'm older than I look. But I have to constantly look for hope to keep despair at bay. So, with that challenge of being a citizen of Johannesburg, I want to welcome all of you. Many of you are not regular citizens of this space. You are most welcome. And I also want to welcome those people who are online, who will be participating in a virtual capacity. You are all welcome. The ACT Alliance Forum, who is hosting this event, is one of those spaces where hope is nurtured and where I find that hope. It's 4 members, we've only got 4. So other church-based organizations are more than welcome to come and talk to us to become members of ACT Alliance. It's the Lutheran Communion of Southern Africa, the Economic Justice Network of the Fellowship of Christian Councils in Southern Africa. It's the Ecumenical Lutheran Church of Southern Africa, and it's ourselves, ACT Bumbano. All of us welcome you to this critical conversation. And for some of you, we will continue these conversations tomorrow and Wednesday in the regional forum meeting that will happen here. Today we are exploring how we as church can keep the hope that our faith demands, especially now when we see all these crises all over the world. In Myanmar, in Sudan, in Gaza, right here in Swaziland, Mozambique, so many other places where people are struggling to defend their dignity. I'm quoting from an SOS that was issued a week ago from an ecumenical group based in Jerusalem. It's called A Jerusalem Voice for Justice. And I quote, in John's Gospel, the disciples gathered on the shore of the Sea of Galilee. Despondent and exhausted, Peter suggested that they simply go back to their lives as fishermen. And yet, although they toiled through the night, they caught nothing. But then Jesus appeared on the shore and called to them, cast the net to the right side of the boat and you will find some. We call out to you, please, try again. Cast your nets again. We beg you not to give up. Let us be filled with the energy of the resurrection and of the Holy Spirit at Pentecost, and recommit to fighting for life and freedom for our brothers and sisters in Gaza and everywhere else in Palestine and Israel. Indeed, we are all called to recommit to life and freedom for people all over the world. We have a wonderful moderator today. Her name is Bongi, which is a long-time collaborator with ACT Bumbano and the ACT community. And I'm going to hand over the microphone to welcome all of you and introduce our esteemed panelists. She's going to hold our dialogue. And I'm hoping it's a dialogue, right? It's not a formal lecture, it's a conversation, a critical conversation, where we explore what our role is as church at a time when the world needs it.
Thank you, Ashley, for the introduction. As has already been said, my name is Bongi Moyobango, and I'll be facilitating this conversation this afternoon. And it's an exciting conversation, I think, and we want to explore and critically reflect on the prophetic role of the church in our times, So the prophetic role of the church in our times. In his seminal book, Walter Brueggemann. The book is called The Prophetic Imagination. He argues that the primary task of prophetic ministry is to nurture, to nourish, and evoke an alternative consciousness. He goes on to say that the prophet disrupts the dominant narrative and offers a vision of a different world rooted in God's justice and compassion. And to help us unpack all of this afternoon, we have an esteemed panel. It has gone from 3 to 2, but I'm sure we will still have an exciting conversation with the 2. And I think just to give their voices a bit of practice, I will ask them to introduce themselves.
Do, re, mi, fa, so, 1, 2, 3. Yes. My name is Mzwandile Molo. I am currently the General Secretary of the South African Council of Churches. Thank you.
Good morning. My name is Rudomar Bueno de Faria, currently the General Secretary of the ACT Alliance, Action by Churches Together. I'm a Brazilian, living in Switzerland for many years, but traveling the world, more than 100 countries, and several times in South Africa as well.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Rudomo, are you sure you are in South Africa right now? Do you know why I ask? You said good morning.
Yes. But I'm sure that I'm in the country, South Africa,
Yes.
right?
The reason I ask is you said good morning.
It's good morning, no? Good afternoon. Sorry. Sorry.
It's all right.
Good
It's
afternoon.
okay.
It's the same time of Geneva. I cannot make this kind of mistakes. Yeah.
Yes. Thank you very much. So friends, what's going to happen this afternoon is, as Ashley has already said, we are going to have a conversation. And the conversation will take the following format. Our 2 panelists will give some input. Their interventions for give or take 10 minutes. Mfundisi Molo, this is not an opportunity for you to preach. So, you know.
I was looking forward to that.
You were looking forward to it. 10 minutes where they will speak to us about their thoughts on the prophetic ministry and where the church should be right now in terms of our topic today. And then we will take a few questions. The questions will come from me. So they will receive a few questions. We'll have a conversation on our own here. And then we will invite questions from the floor so that we have two-way conversation. Is that all right? Okay, excellent. Reverend Molo, you are already holding the mic, so I assume that you will go first.
It was a trap.
It was a trap, right? Yes, Ashley.
Reassure the people online that they can put their questions in the chat box.
Yes, thank you very much. Yes, for everybody who is joining us online, please write your questions in the chat box and they'll be read out in the room and we will respond to them. If, in fact, if we're able to, Thabo, we can actually allow them to give us their questions. I'm sure is the audio? They'll type? It's easier to type. Okay, very good. So, Mfundisi Molo, you have the mic, and we are going to ask you to give your first intervention. And as you give your intervention, keep in mind a couple of these questions, including what does it mean for the church to be prophetic today, in today's context? And also, have we as the church sidelined prophetic ministry for looking good? And I'll stop there for now. I don't want to confuse the process.
Thank you very much. Greetings to everybody, those online. I'm going to deposit certain thoughts, and then hopefully from those thoughts we can come back to converse if there's any question. The first thought I'd like to deposit for today is, I think we need to dissuade ourselves of this idea of the notion of a church as monolithic. I grew up in the early 80s with the idea where we had a wonderful poster where the church was up there and there was the robes, and in the robes were held in things, and the tagline is, the church is a site of struggle. The fact that we assume that the church will be prophetic by the fact of it being church is a dangerous notion, because it doesn't allow us to enter into, oh goodness me, after all that noise. So the first deposit of thoughts is really to say to all of us that we must accept that the church is a coming together of many influences and many contestations. And those contestations are going to be part of the church until the church comes to its eternal glory, whatever that will be. And therefore, if we want to talk about the church in the prophetic sense of it, we ourselves who believe in that point must be ready to engage in serious struggle within the church to engage the notion of making the church prophetic. Because being prophetic is a propelling of a movement within the church itself, because institutionally, the church is always in tension about self-preservation of the institution and keeping true to its mission as God has called us to be. And the instincts of the church are, in many cases, about self-preservation, rather than being the sacrifice needed in kind of this idea that the church is a gift to the world, rather than the church surviving in the world. And because of that, therefore, I say to everybody, when you say what the prophetic role of the church, the first question is, try and understand for yourself which church you are talking about. Because if you don't deal with that in your mind, you are going to sit around and expect conference statements to be prophetic. And the truth is they're a result of contestations within those institutions. And if we do not take that seriously, we are going to be in trouble. The first thing. The second thing is to also understand for ourselves that church is both institution and outside of institution. That when we say church and prophetic work, we do include both the individual but also the institution, so that we do not evaluate the impact of church simply by what institutions do, because sometimes institutions themselves are not the most powerful instrument of that transformation. I say to many people who want to understand the South African church history process, sometimes as a country we live in some illusion that the church was at the forefront of transformation of the country. If you go back and study the church properly, to give a simple example, when the WCC proposed and adopted the World Program to combat racism, many of the churches in South Africa were opposed to that because they argued that that is a way of giving money to terrorists, and therefore they were not part of that forefront struggle to engage with that. And it's only in the late 80s and 90s where the churches, now that the tide is turning, where they kind of begin to be in the forefront of that struggle. So when we talk of church, that's the first, because let us be very careful, because we are going to use that word in a generic way that doesn't help us define what we are. By the way, even within church, there are those who are conservative. There are those who believe that the status quo as it is what it is supposed to be. And therefore, contestation for that is very important and strong. So that's the first point that I want to make. The second point I want to put in is that the church in South Africa that I'm part of has lived with an ambiguity of what it means to be church in a transformed society. It has lived that ambiguity because, in all honesty, we have to deal with people whom we believe were comrades together. And we now, these comrades who were struggling together, we're building a new society together. We believe the instincts, the commitment, and the visions are the same. And therefore, we allow latitude for wrong things to happen. Because in our own mind, we know the heart of this person.
So that mine is not working. You need to start from the beginning.
I don't know what I said at the beginning. I don't know. So what do I do? Oh, okay. So in my thinking, that says the church in South Africa had to learn to live outside of its naivety. There are moments where I even think maybe we needed to go to that metaphor, Karen Busak, when it's the loss of innocence. We needed the loss of innocence 2.0. Because the innocence of freedom is one that allowed the church not to be as prophetic, as powerful as it should be, because there was a belief in the common agenda, the common commitments that were part of the journey. I'm sometimes not sure whether we could have transited without going through that space, because being historical about it means you accept that the people that you worked with had the same commitments on that. The third thing I want to say is that part of the church's search for its prophetic role and prophetic voice needs to also include the search for the idea of ecumenism and common action. With freedom came the unfortunate reality that churches withdrew into denominational, if not personal, interests that allowed us as member churches to live for those things that we thought were simply for church life, whatever we thought they were. And what that did then, as part of the consequence of that, it allowed our faith to be personalized, and the pursuit of personal happiness and the pursuit of at least my family's thing. Now we are not concerned with societal matters, we are concerned with the things that matter to us here. And what that has developed is a kind of narcissistic religion, a religion of the self that is disconnected to the rest of societal needs. And if that narcissistic religion is going to make any impact, it is only at the point of mercy. You need bread, I'm going to find a way to make sure that you've got bread. And that created the soup kitchen mentality that you all want to be involved in, because it's a kind of thing that makes us believe that we do that. And because of that, Bongi, the result comes and says, we do not have leaders who have an ecumenical commitment. And because they have no ecumenical commitment, they are produced by churches who are interested in their institutional survival, if not institutional integrity. And therefore, they don't produce leaders for society. They don't produce leaders for the ecumenical movement. They produce leaders for their own churches. And therefore, their internal dynamics makes it impossible for the church to become as prophetic as it should be. And therefore, we enter in that space where there's a, call it flight, there was also a poverty of analytical ability of the church asking itself, what is it that we're able to do, which what the Kairos document calls for, the ability to analyze society, to analyze what is happening, to analyze the causes of the things that we live through, to analyze where does poverty come from? Is it a divinely ordained thing? Is it an accident of history? Or is it part of a deliberate process that creates wealth for the few and that exploits the majority on the ground? And how does it manifest itself? Where does it locate itself in the development of society as a whole? We don't have that as a gifting to the churches. As a result, we then chase headlines. If there's something that happens, then we speak, because that's the headline. If there's an issue there, we get seen without deliberately asking ourselves analytically, where is society as we stand? Even our analysis of politics, I always smile. And when we think our problem as South Africans, our problem is Ramaphosa or Zuma. In America, the empire thinks the problem is Trump or Harris or Biden. If you go deep down, you realize that the problem is deeper than Biden or Trump. Behind that, it is unaccountable economic interests that go beyond borders, that enter into spaces and exploit and extract, and out of that, then they themselves hijack the democratic process, the democratic institutions that they use to manipulate the social order in the world, and how they've located themselves now on the side, even owning media institutions, through which then they perpetuate this narrative without them being accountable. So you change this one, they still remain in the pocket of those who are powerful. And where we need to find ourselves then as the church is to ask the question in a provocative way, where is the cry and the pain of the world? And are we as the church prepared and willing not only to hear that cry, not only to amplify it, but to allow that cry to shape who we become? And that calls on individuals within the church not to wait for the institution, but to contest the institution, so that the institution is geared towards a bias and a commitment beyond words into a lived reality that allows our people to say to themselves, those who are in the margins of society are not only victims of where we are, but they're a genesis of what is possible. There is a wonderful little book written by John Sobrino, which says something to the effect, the utopian image, and which says something to the effect that no salvation outside of the poor. And in that he argues that the poor are not a mere existence of those whom we must alienate, we must alleviate problems for. They are the basis of the new imagination of what the world can be. So they are not mere victims, but they're agents of new possibilities and of new life. And if we locate ourselves there, our eschatological vision, or vision of the future from God, is directed by the experiences and the dreams of the poor rather than the powerful. Thank you.
Thank you very much. You've shared a mouthful, and there's lots of food for thought. And I hold on to that last part where not just about bringing the conversation from the margins to the center, but about the church being the individuals who need to reform the institution so that the institution becomes prophetic and speaks to, and scratches the itch, identifies the real itch and speaks to the actual cries of the people.
I don't know if you can hold this while you speak with that. We're fighting with the mic situation. Yes, just for now, and then when you give over,
Yes.
we can clip you, sir. Yeah, we're just figuring out the mic situation.
Okay, all right. But can you hear me for now?
Yes.
Okay, very good. See. So for me, that's very important, and there's a lot more you said. The fact that we are starting from an assumption that the church should, by its very nature, be prophetic, and you have disabused us of that idea and said we must really rethink whether or not the church, by its nature, is a prophetic entity, and that it needs to be shaped towards prophecy. Rudamar, can we pick up from there? And you will tell us, Reverend Molo spoke about the importance of ecumenism. And I think that's a lot, that's got a lot to do with the kind of work that you do. And maybe you can pick up from there and speak to us about whether prophetic voice or prophetic action is really about social justice or spiritual truth calling. What is it all about? Okay, I'm not sure what to do with the baby.
You hold the.
Yeah, don't worry, you can just speak. I'm just gonna clip you. Okay. Bongi? Don't worry about that. Yeah, don't worry about that, just speak.
So I will try to speak loud from here. No, it's starting from the point that was mentioned in terms of the prophetic. For me as well, I'm from Latin America. I grew up in Latin America, a region that has contributed. You mentioned John Sobrino, that was living in El Salvador, and I lived there as well. I know him. I have engaged with him. But also in a time when the liberation theology came up from that region. And for me and for everyone as Christians living in Latin America, that was the answer, because you mentioned to be member of a church is to be close to Jesus Christ's examples. And we will try to live and by his teachings and guidance. And for us, for me, for this conference that we are discussing today, if you ask me if the church is prophetic, institutional church, or even the community of faith, I'm extremely disappointed to say no. There is no prophetic voice in the churches in all the regions and also in the ecumenical movement. That is a shame that we need to address, because in Latin America, in the 70s, 80s, basically the theology and the churches have shaped even the political sphere, not only the theological contribution that was given to the global north, to the global south, but also to the political movements, social movements. That came from the prophetic voice and experiences from the churches. Today, we need to make a mapping to see where this prophetic voice is coming from. It's not coming from the churches. And we have a dichotomy that exists because of the times that we are living today. The churches and religion is being instrumentalized politically, and we are endorsing that sometimes as churches as well. Sometimes by ignorance or not knowing or not being well informed by the churches, the church leadership or the ecumenical movement, and sometimes because we don't believe exactly in the principles that Christ has given to us as our Christian values. So today we have a crisis of values in humanity, and we see that. I don't need even to mention. You have a good example in your own country with the apartheid. But look what's going on in Gaza, what is going on in Sudan. Who is caring about that? How the voices of the churches are coming? They are no, because they are extremely afraid of being prophetic. Afraid for different reasons. Small churches, because of the polarization that we face in society today. And it's not only political polarizations between governments, it's about the families itself. Within our own families, we have different views because of the political narratives that exist, that are used to divide people and to create a new narrative and new theologies as well, like in the case of Brazil. I was on holidays in March in my country, in Brazil, and I heard from one of the pastors of the recent created church there, but very big, mega church, saying if Jesus Christ will be on earth today, he will be armed to protect himself. That was the kind of theology, or not theology, but the speech that is given to the people, and the people resonate with that because of violence, because of the economic distress, or whatever it is. So then we need to see where you are failing, how close we are as churches to the principles, why we were created, basically. So that is my frustration that I see. So the polarization, the political polarization, is present in all the continents. Maybe Latin America is the most, and US as well, the Americas, is the most visible ones. How religion is instrumentalized. How the confluence of fundamentalism, the religious, economic, and political, are affecting our way of seeing and the world and acting as human beings. So we have a combination of factors that are dividing us, and shrinking churches everywhere. Africa is an exception. That is where we see the growing Christians, but still with not necessarily connected with the prophetic voice that we would like to have. It's more evangelical, it's more Pentecostals that sometimes are not connected very much with the issue of justice, but also because it's different. For instance, in Europe. In Europe, we see the churches also not being prophetic because they are afraid of the political influence, impact that we will have if they will speak out. Or the money that they will get from governments that are supporting the diaconal work that they do globally. So there is this challenges within the ecumenical movement and within the churches everywhere, how we will balance our mission and our prophetic voice with the context of the world today. And there are many things that we need to do, invest a lot of education, theological educations, and also based on the examples that we see how we understand humanity. How I can see you as created at the image of God. What that means for us today. So my frustration is I don't see that. I do not see movements. Some of them, like in my church in Brazil, I'm a Lutheran in Brazil, they are very much committed to justice, but they are not speaking out. They are not standing up against the injustices that are happening because they are afraid of dividing the membership, reducing, creating new dissident churches in there. That is the big challenges they have. Or others that are afraid that they will not get even the contribution the churches give for the work that they are supposed to do. So then we need to see, and let's see the youth in all the parts of the world. They are questioning the church today. Why should I be part? My daughters that have been part of the church, now they are, why I should go to the church now? I'm not losing my faith and the teaching of Jesus Christ, but I do not see reason for me to be with a group of people that are excluding. And the churches are excluding people. And Jesus didn't do that. They exclude people based on their race, nationality, migration status, everything. We see that everywhere, in Europe, Latin America, Asia, and Africa. So we are excluding people. So basically, the society today, we have two big groups. And it's not only I'm including also the secular movement there. Those that want to include people independently of, without any kind of discriminations, independently of their status, national status, or even sexual orientation status, that are not doing that. And the others that are excluding based on, our culture do not allow these kind of things, or our economics is being affected by migration, refugees, and so on and so on. So the question is about that you mentioned, for the ecumenical movement and also for an organizations like ACT Alliance, that is Action by Churches Together, that we are part of the churches. We have churches in the memberships, and we have also specialized ministries or social departments of the churches that are members of the ACT Alliance. And for us, to be prophetic today is to be to promote faith in action, is to be approached with the diaconal dimension, with the social service, whatever you call when you are engaging in promoting, saving lives, promoting dignity of everyone. So basically for us, it's about compassion that we don't see today. I recall back in Brazil when I was very close to the theology of liberation, when the people mention about compassion, I said, no, it's about justice. But today I'm a defender of compassion that is missing. Solidarity, we don't see that anymore, even within the churches, between our fellows. Are we supporting and being in solidarity with each one of us in the struggles that we are facing? That is not happening. And the other one, it's about inclusion. We cannot, and that is our engagement, we are not discriminating and we are including everyone. We are not asking their identities or their origins, anything. And the principal one that's part of the prophetic voice is justice. We need to denounce the injustices, and we need to announce the good news by practice. And for us, I think that the diaconal perspective is a good entry point for the churches to become prophetic again. And when I mention prophetic again, is collectively, that we hear the church's voice everywhere in all the parts of all the continents. That is exactly what I think. So it's a frustration, and also sadness, because we are not able as churches and religious leaders, Christians, to help people to understand that we should not be manipulated, we should not be used by political or forces, and we need to put our focus in our beliefs, basically, as Christians.
Thank you. Yes, round of applause. Thank you, thank you. May I have a mic, please? Thank you.
Sorry, now this will be the third. Okay, but you can let this rove around.
Can I just
Yep.
speak?
You can speak into this for the room.
For the room. I have a preacher's voice. I have one. Yes, thank you. Thank you very much for that very insightful input. And you started off by saying that there is no prophecy right now. The church is not being prophetic. And my question, Fundis Molo, as just as a follow-up is, nature never allows for a vacuum. Nature never allows for a vacuum. Therefore, if the church is not being prophetic, who is filling that gap? Where's the voice coming from? And you spoke further, Rudomo, about the church being captured. You talked about how the church has been captured, and there is a fear of being prophetic, a fear of being prophetic. Do you believe that the church has become almost domesticated? You know how we have pets that are domesticated and we keep them in our homes. Do you believe that the church has become domesticated? Is there a problem? No? A pet, yes, yes. And those are words from, I found those words in the input from Reverend Pumla Nzimande. She was going to talk about that, about the domesticated church and the problem of the domesticated church. And you also speak about how there is a commitment to justice, but a fear. And my question then would be, is it possible to act prophetically and not have prophetic voice? Because what prophetic voice does is it lends spiritual grounding to the prophetic action. So is it possible for the church to act prophetically but not have the prophetic voice? Over to you, Reverend Molo. Let's start with the gap.
Thank you very much. I live in this tension, this in my mind, in my reading of the prophets are never in the majority. The prophet tradition is not a tradition that is based on being in the majority, not even at the center of the power, even institutionally of the church. And I say that because I really want, in my own mind, I really want to say, at least to myself, let alone others, that part of my responsibility, it is to seriously work of that institution itself, so that the prophetic tradition that is being raised about here is one that comes out. Because with all due respect, this is my view and my study of history, is that even of church history, my view is that the pre-Constantine church, which was a free, committed church, has lost its potency in the Constantine era. And therefore, the post-Constantine era church, which is dominated by allegiance to power and idolatry to structures, is one that has always sought to stifle the prophetic tradition. And part of that contestation is one that we must take seriously ourselves. Otherwise, we are going to wait for some miracle somewhere that with some prophetic voice is going to come. There's going to be some council somewhere where churches come together and then speak prophetically about what needs to be spoken about. The inclination of the church institutionally is to align itself towards power. The temptation for idolatrous existence is a constant threat to the voice of the church, because the powerful contest the church in order for it to be a place of sanctification of the structural situation that exists in our spaces. And I'm hammering on this point precisely because I think we are going to get ourselves into where we are frustrated with this animal called the church, and we get so frustrated, and then we get demotivated because we think to ourselves it's not getting where it's supposed to go to. So that's the first thing I really want to say. The amplification and the praxis of the church around issues of justice and commitment to that. And I fully agree that the church has chosen, at least the institution church, has chosen the side of the powerful. There's no debate in my mind about that. That wherever the church wants to find its space now for relevance, whether it is prestige, whether it's accessibility to power, whether it is a sense of being seen, whether it is a sense of wanting to have amassed so much income and kind of social power, it chooses somewhere. Somebody said to me recently that politics follows power. It might be that institutional church follows power. Where the power is, that's where the institutional church wants to be. And because of that, therefore, there needs to be a serious commitment to calling it back to what Christ has asked us to do. And part of that work, in my view, and I'm going to say this with the greatest respect, the churches we produce for now in the life of the church are not produced with a deep analytical commitment into analyzing where the life is. We are not producing church leaders who sit and ask the key questions of society and of life as has been asked. So they live with rhetorical generalities that are unable to be liberative. Some of them even live with hijacking the language of liberation as part of being religious and part of being church. They can quote Gustav Guterres, they can quote everybody else, yet in character and in expression, they betray those basic things because fundamentally they are not there. We have seen church leaders who are strong on the race matter, and they can speak a lot about race issues, but the same person is a bigot when it comes to sexual identity, that when it comes to gender issues, because there is no connection with the deeper vision of the world. A South African economist, Sambita Blanche, wrote a wonderful little book. It's called Lost in Transformation. Lost in Transformation. And in that book, Sambita Blanche argues and says, when he looks at everything we've done economically up until 1998, I think if I remember, he says we have been able to defeat the evil of apartheid with all its values. But we have not been able to replace that system with a life-centered and a life-generating value system that defeats the power of death that comes from all these exclusions that we talk about. So part of the hard work, and I say this because I live in the space called institutional church. I live in that space. And I say that because if we wait for the church to wake up one day and somebody says to the church, hey, be prophetic today, it won't come. It won't come. It will only come with those within the church who are committed to this cause. And sometimes, typically, like all prophets, in the institution that they are part of, they'll be lonely. They'll be left on their own because the institution is doing pragmatic work. The institution says, we know the commitment, but it's too costly to do whatever needs to be done. It takes individuals of conviction to stay there and say to themselves, as long as you are delaying, we'll stand up for what is right. By the way, Bongi, truth doesn't depend on the majority. It depends on the commitments we have. And therefore, we need to make sure that we do not wait one day for some conference somewhere that is going to make the church prophetic. Indeed, the domestication of the church is an interesting notion, but also remember, as Brueggemann has taught us, even God can be domesticated. And therefore, part of the liberative imagination of Egypt as a way out is not only a liberation of the people, it is the liberation of God. And part of the journey we must take is the commitment to say, how do we liberate God? And we liberate God from being a God that is not in the hands of the powerful in society, but in the hands of those who know the possibilities. And takes me to the last point. Part of being prophetic is the need to convince our people that the future does not belong to the powerful, that the future belongs to all of us who believes in the power of vulnerability, in the power of solidarity, in the power of allowing pain to speak, in the power of allowing for the faces of pain to be seen. And perhaps to remind the church, when God calls Moses, despite all Moses' troubles, you know Moses had problems. He ran away and had many things. When God comes to Moses, God doesn't say, I've heard your cry. He says, I've heard the cries of my people. And therefore, how to contest that view into the church to say, God is not coming for your cry as the bishop or as the general secretary. And let me say some much more loudly, God doesn't even come for the cry of the church. God has come down for the cry of the people. And how to change that thinking into the mainstream of the church is struggle. And I'm saying we must struggle, including the praxis of the things we talk about on the programmatic work. But for me, at this mind, it is trying to make sure that we know we are going to be in struggle with a church that is seduced by power.
Thank you very much. Do you want to add to that?
Yeah,
let's just continue the conversation.
Yeah, these two questions that you mentioned associated with the domesticated churches. I'm not a theologian, but I don't believe that the churches are domesticated. I think that the churches are domesticating their own people that is there. I will give some examples to make it a little bit clear. When we have, you mentioned about the gender or sexual orientation things. When we have someone within the churches, especially women, that don't have spaces in leadership, or when they start to speak out, the church is the leadership sometimes saying, stopping this person. I have situations in Latin America that even threats to the life of women that were trying to speak out and to be prophetic within the community are being marginalized. And other groups as well could be, because today there is this issue, or if you are asking for justice, you are a communist, you are a socialist, you are associated with this political party. If you are supporting someone, then it's there is this element as well. So groups within the churches are discriminated. So how we view, and there is a try in some of the churches to domesticate the believers, the attendees of the worships and and the community. And then that brings me to the issue of the prophetic voice. The prophetic voice doesn't need to be public. The prophetic voice needs to start within the church because you are not listening to it. How will you create a mass that is thinking about justice if in the space that we believe that is the space where you should go and the answers are there, are not talking about that or are giving orientation that is not necessarily in line with what Christ taught us. So basically, then that is the issue. Be prophetic. Let's start by within of the churches. And of course, we need to be, because being also prophetic, we need to think about the protection of the people. You know, that is biblical in terms of protection of the community, the Christian community. So we need to make a proper analysis in terms of how we will do that. And there is ways. But the only way to change in being prophetic as a church is to have the whole of the church together, the body, all the body together. And that is the way that I see.
Thank you very much. I'll ask one last question before I open it up to everybody to ask questions and make comments. And you mentioned earlier, Rudamar, about the youth. And the youth are often seen as marginalized within the church. You shared about how your own children are not, they don't want to go to church anymore because they don't see the relevance of the church. And if there's one thing I've seen, I mean, in Africa, for instance, we have a demographic dividend of what, 70% youth under 35 in Africa. And if there's one thing I have seen within the church space is that young people are tired of waiting. They're tired of waiting for the church to become prophetic. And therefore, they do what they believe needs to be done. Do you believe that young people are the makings of the current and future prophetic ministry of the church?
Yes, and the churches needs to give the space for them, because otherwise they will look another. Why you have people leaving the churches, especially young people, are not interested, because they are joining other social movements that are fighting for climate justice, for instance, or protection of people on the move, refugees, IDPs, whatever. So I believe that as you mentioned, they should be taking the role now. And we need to open these spaces, not only to open, but to promote. Because that we see within the ACT Alliance itself. Some of you have been in the General Assembly of the ACT Alliance. We have proposed, created special funds to allow the participation of the young people. But still, the participation is not given. If you will not promoting as a special group participating of the discussions, then they will not be attending. So we need to change our mindset and see how the church is going to survive, I'm asking. You know, maybe, as I mentioned before, Africa is the only example where the church is growing in terms of numbers. But in Latin America, it's not the case. In Europe, you know that for a long time, people are leaving more and more for several reasons, sometimes even because you are prophetic. No, you are being a communist. I don't want to be associated with that anymore. When you speak out justice in Gaza, for instance, or in Sudan or Afghanistan, whatever it is.
We talk about prophetic imagination, and Brueggemann, if we go back to him, talks about how we've got to be poetic, even in the way we speak about the world we want to see. How do we manage that within the kind of geopolitical space and AI, misinformation, disinformation world that we live in?
That's a huge question. It needs it needs 20 conferences on their own. It's not one conference. I'm going to really speak about kind of views rather than answering every detail, because there's quite a lot of things there. The first view I have is simply this: there's no movement in the world that I know that is not radicalized and transformed by the power and the energy of the youth. No movement I know in the world. The African National Congress, which is part of the history of this country, up until, is it 1948, the Youth League? Was it Youth League? 1948. Up until the Youth League, there was this idea of moral persuasion based on deputations and all those things you send to people, whatever. Then 1948, the Youth League said to itself, no ways. There must be a radical program that is going to change where we are. That's that program that brought what we call the Defiance Campaign. That's that program that ended up including controversies or whatever else you view of it. What's the point I'm making? The church, like any movement, social movement, needs radically thinking, energizing young people who will infuse in it an energy that helps them clarify and contextualize the vision that they have for the future. So there's no debating that at all. And any church that doesn't take that as a gift to itself, it is participation in its own self-suicidal tendencies. Because without that energy, you are living in that energy and imagination, you are living in a societal freezer, which has frozen yourself in time and history, which does not allow you with new possibilities. And therefore, even in programmatic and radical action, the young people are needed. So any church needs to get those young people as part of that conversation. And therefore, spaces need to be created. But the next point I want to say, I myself was once young. And I know no church that concedes its power and say to young people, come over and take over. I know no church. I just gave an example of that thing. It was a thing for the youth of the SACC, who were saying we want to pull the church back into our spaces. And therefore, I normally say to young people, we have normalized institutional life and allow ourselves to live within those institutions. Young people need to find the courage and the patience and the commitment to say to themselves, this is our institution too. This is what God has given us also. These old people, whoever they are, as problematic as they are, we are going to enter into consistent dialogue with them, because we need their institutional memory, we need their own commitments of building this institution as an offering for us to have a building block to go on. When I tell this with some of my own young people when we're young, when you leave the church because you're disillusioned with it, because you're too angry with it, you are giving over a potent, latently potent institution that can become a mass movement of the people on the ground. What is that base communities thing from the Latin American possibilities that come? I tell people who are Marxists, who are in gleaning, and I say, I don't fully comprehend Marx, but I know something about Karl Marx. He says, the greatest agency for liberation are the masses themselves. And all they need critical mass of engagement that energizes them into this transformative act. So if you leave them, you give up on them, that mass is then in the hands of the conservative, power-drunk, power-chasing, and idolatrous part of the church that seeks to sanctify that which is here. One of the things that I learned from Brueggemann, now that we mention it, is how Brueggemann argues for us in a beautiful way. He says, if you take the God of Moses, is the God who liberates the people. When you go into Canaan, God changes. He's no more the God of the people. He is the God of David's house. And how David's house becomes the center of what it means to be in God, in relationship with God. And therefore how not only the temple, but how the palace has become a place where the relationship between the people and God is regulated. Because the palace, and the question I always ask, have we noticed that those who fought for our liberation, who led us in liberation, have appropriated our narrative of our liberation? God now is with them rather than with the people. And how do you engage that radical thinking that says, no, the God is not the God of David. It is the God of the poor, the God that is there to liberate all of us, not because Solomon, is he really that wise?
Thank you. Please let me give them another round of applause.